Hi, and welcome to Introduction to Public Health Consulting. I'm Andrea Mantsios. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Public Health Innovation and Action, Phia. Phia is a public health consultancy committed to making meaningful impact through research and programs to improve the health of communities. This is a two-part series. Part one today is going to be Public Health Consulting 101. So I'm going to give an overview, orientation to what public health consulting looks like as a career path. And if you like what you see and you want to tune in for more, part two will be the ins and outs of public health consulting, where I do a deeper dive for those seriously considering this career path to look at some of the nitty-gritty, as I call it, the details of what public health consulting looks like as a path. The agenda for part one includes first me giving you a sense of my path to consulting, talking through some of the basics of what it looks like to be a public health consultant. I'll talk through the pros and cons of consulting, and then some really fantastic resources you can pull on in public health consulting. And I'll finish by talking about some things that you can do right now to prepare yourself to get on a path towards pursuing public health consulting. So I thought I'd just briefly start with my path to consulting because I thought it might be helpful for you to know the kinds of decisions I was making along the way, and perhaps they resonate with some of your own decision making as you think through your next steps throughout your career. So after undergrad, I started working at a major hospital in New York City, where I had a front row seat to healthcare delivery, and I was working in child and adolescent psychiatry, a great window into mental health service provision. I loved that work, but I really wanted to get my feet wet in an international setting. I was really pulled to global health. And so I did a service learning internship with the Global Service Corps in Tanzania. And after that, I came to Hopkins to do my M.H.S, which is now called the M.S. I was in the International Health Department in the track on social and behavioral interventions, and I had a wonderful training experience there for my M.H.S. And then I went to work in the Division of Global Health Sciences as a School of Medicine, where I was working on an epidemiological study of HIV, tuberculosis, and syphilis among people who use drugs in Mexico. I then came back to New York, where I'm from, and worked at the New York City Health Department for several years. I started as an HIV prevention specialist and worked my way up to being a director of HIV testing programs, which was wonderful. I loved that trajectory, but I kind of felt like I reached a glass ceiling at a certain point and wanted to be at the table for certain conversations that I wasn't part of, and they were pretty much kind of higher level research conversations, and I felt I really needed to come get the terminal degree, and that's when I went back to Hopkins for my Ph.D. in the Department of Health, Behavior, and Society, and I then went on to work at the School of Public Health there in the Department of Health, Behavior, and Society after I graduated for a couple of years as a assistant research scientist. It was a wonderful path. All of this is to highlight for you that I was in a healthcare setting, I was in government, I was in academia, and all of those were really interesting, great experiences along the way. But I came to a point where I wasn't sure I wanted to return to any one of those sectors. And my life circumstances were that I was then pregnant at the time and thinking about what came next. So I found myself at a bit of a crossroads, if you'll pardon the really cheesy visual here, but this is really why I went into consulting. I was thinking through kind of two main domains that you can see reflected in just a brief overview in this word cloud. There was a lot going through my mind at the time, but as you can see here, I have like two domains I was thinking through: career and personal life. And in the career domain, some of the things you see here are I was considering, like, would I go back to government and all the kind of bureaucracy and red tape that I found that can be in working for local and state health departments? Would I go to academia, stay on that path? And there were things about that were really seemed challenging to me. Like, I didn't really want to be in a soft money environment. I was thinking about the NIH grant trajectory. Did I want to apply for a K and then an R21? And what would that path look like? I was at the time considering going into the foundation world. What would that look like? And then in my personal life, I was thinking about my baby that was due in a few months, and I was thinking about wanting to have flexibility for time with my family and how to create a lifestyle for myself where I could pursue my passions, be with my family in addition to doing the work that I love so much. And thus my business was born. I came out of that messy word cloud you just saw and emerged have some clarity, not really knowing what it was going to look like, but knowing that I wanted to pursue consulting. And I started Public Health Innovation and Action, Phia, I say, is my third baby. And this was really my answer to the questions I was just thinking through on that previous slide. I really did want to, through public health consulting, get to work with different clients across those sectors that I was thinking through. I wanted to have a flexibility in my lifestyle that I was thinking through. And now I'm going to, for the next 2 slides, give you basically a PSA of why I love consulting so that I can hopefully pique your interest in pursuing this. And then we'll talk about what it looks like to actually do this. So in brief, I love public health consulting, first for my portfolio of work. This is just a snapshot of the kinds of projects I have open on my desktop right now. Well, actually, this is previous and current projects. I was just evaluating Michigan State's opioid overdose surveillance system. I had last year just developed some health messaging for the DC Health Department around COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy among communities of color. I was working on exploring experiences of women raising children with congenital Zika syndrome in Brazil. I'm currently doing an awesome project for actually a private health insurance company on developing a learning community around social determinants of health. I'm working on developing a shared patient provider decision-making tool for oral versus long-acting injectable PrEP. And I'm working right here in New York on examining facilitators of PrEP use among cis and transgender Latinx women here in the city. So you can see diversity in the topics I have on my plate at any given time, and also in my clients. So I'm working for, in this just snapshot, you see a state health department, a city health department, international work, domestic work, private, public. There's a lot going on here, as you see. So this is like the first thing I wanted to highlight about why consulting rocks, because you get to put together the most diverse portfolio in terms of topics and clients that you want. The other reason I absolutely love consulting is my schedule. It's just a snapshot of a typical week here, and you'll see I have really large blocks of project work. I work a lot on my projects. That's the nature of, you know, having a job. You work a lot, and I love doing that work. But I've also sprinkled throughout my weeks things that I want to do in my life, and I do them when I want to do them. So this is a random time, but I go grocery shopping every Monday at 9 a.m. because that's how I like to start my week. And then I dive right into calls and project work. I have in green how I've chiseled out time for professional development, attending webinars, participating in consulting work groups. I do business management chunks of time on Friday, and I do personal life stuff like taking my 6-month-old to splash and swim in the middle of the day on Thursday. And I take my toddler for Splurge Friday every Friday for ice cream or churros or whatever we're doing that week. And I'm a passionate home cook. So for me, it was important to chisel out time to prep and make dinner every night, because that for me is like my meditation. It's important for my mental health. And the truth is that I often then sit down at the computer at night and work late hours because I'm okay doing that. But all of this to say that you are your own boss in consulting, and you make the schedule that fits your lifestyle and what you want to do. So hopefully that whet your appetite as to how cool public health consulting can be and why it's a really great lifestyle choice. And I thought we would then transition into talking about, now that you're prepped and ready to think about making that leap, what are the things you need to think through? So let's dive in. This is a broad picture start. Let's think very broadly about the different kinds of areas of expertise you might be pursuing in the world of public health. So broadly speaking, do you love program evaluation? Or are you like a health education nut? Are you like a whiz at data analysis? Or are you just like fantastic with social marketing and social media and public health? Which area of expertise you kind of fit into? And this is obviously not an exhaustive list. It's just getting you started thinking broadly. I think what's important to then do is think kind of within those broad areas, what would you say would be a niche for yourself that you want to establish? And that means kind of honing in on something that you love or have particular experience in. And that's important for defining what you would look like as a public health consultant, what you're bringing to the field. So an example I have here is one of my colleagues who is a fantastic public health consultant, is like an absolute wealth of knowledge and information. She has background and expertise in health education broadly. That's her training and her background. And she, after many years of doing trainings and providing technical assistance on online learning and courses, she then kind of chiseled out her niche as a public health e-learning instructional design specialist. That is so wonderfully specific that she has a client base, she gets referrals, she has everybody knowing that she is the go-to person for public health e-learning instructional design. And what that means is basically she'll provide a blueprint for her clients of how do you put together public health courses, trainings, information in the most effective way using adult learning theory. And she's married kind of all these different areas of expertise that she had past experience with and a love for into this niche. So I think it's good to think broadly about what area of expertise you fit into, and then how to establish a niche within that that's uniquely yours. So then I've just put down here a couple of the kinds of areas of clients you work with as a public health consultant. And you can think about who you might want to work with based on where you like to work, where you have worked, what would be exciting for you in working with different clients. It could be everything from, oh, I really think I have a lot to bring to government agencies. I've worked in city health departments or state health departments. I know the deal. I would be a great consultant for them to bring in because they don't have to orient me to what that's like. I know that environment well. Or maybe you just love academic researchers and you want to keep working with them. So great, that would be a great place for you to fit. But I also will say that in my experience, and I think most consultants would say the same, you tend to work with a lot of different clients because it depends on what projects you're pursuing and what people need to bring consultants in for. But this is just a snapshot of the kinds of clients you work with as a public health consultant by general sector. So why are these folks bringing in consultants? And this is helpful to think through so you know what role you're supposed to play for them. So organizations are hiring consultants for the following reasons. They're really looking for expertise in a specific area. They need help solving a problem. They need help meeting a deadline. They have a time crunch and they need someone to come in and help them meet that deadline. They might need help completing a project and they need that new or kind of outside perspective that they'll bring in a consultant for. Oftentimes it's to support short-term staffing needs. It's oftentimes just cheaper for them to hire a part-time consultant than to bring in a full-time employee. So they may have their teams are stretched too thin and they need to complete a project. They need to supplement the current workload that's on the plate of their team with some additional hands on deck. And that's the role you will serve. So this is why folks would bring in a consultant. And I think it kind of begs the question for everyone then, well, how do you know when you're expert enough to be that expert called in to be the public health consultant, bringing their area of expertise? And again, Leah Roman, whose link I put at the bottom here to her blog on this, I think sums it up beautifully. It's like these 4 basic domains to think through in evaluating your experience that makes you that expert. First, you want to think about education and training. Currently in a degree program, great, check that off. Are there any other relevant certificates you need based on what your area of expertise is? What education and training are you bringing to the table? It's really important to have real life work experience. So it doesn't really fall so well if you are talking into a potential client. You say, yeah, like this one time in this course I was taking, I was doing a group project and we did something similar to what you're talking about. That doesn't really carry that weight that we want. You really need to have real life experience to pull on relevant past work to say to a client, like, I've dealt with something similar. I know how to handle this kind of thing. Here's what I'm bringing to the table. Proven record is super important. That means both references, people who can speak to your ability to work on projects, the things you've done in the past. And now we're in an era of really your online presence. Like what does your publication list look like? If someone's Googling you, what do you have online? Maybe you write a blog, and maybe you have a huge LinkedIn presence where you're posting a lot, and the kinds of projects that you're working on, someone can see posted there, and maybe you've shown real thought leadership in your LinkedIn presence. So online presence and references, I think, can really show proven record that helps build your expertise. And then, as I've mentioned already, the specific niche that you've chosen shows that you have a targeted specialization that you're bringing to the table to fill specifically the need they have. And all of this should add to that confidence that you really need to bring when people are looking for help on a problem. You need to be able to walk through the door and say, I'm here to help you with that problem. I've got what it takes. So that those 4 domains hopefully contribute to that confidence that you can then bring to the table as you say, I'm here to take on that problem with you and serve as your public health consultant with this area of expertise to help you solve your problem. Here's just a brief slide on consultant profile, because I thought this might be helpful. The things that I think of as kind of personality traits that are really helpful are really, you need to be independent, to work independently, you need to be personable, patient, you need to be a bit of a risk taker, disciplined and flexible, confident, realistic, organized, self-motivated, and creative. I think those are some key traits that you need to hold. And I think to be a successful consultant, you really need to do the following things. You need to think critically, ask good questions, listen and identify where you could be of most help, and you definitely need to be persistent and resilient. Here are some of the pros and cons of consulting I thought I'd highlight for you. In terms of the pros, I think it gets summed up with just like autonomy. You have a tremendous amount of autonomy. You are able to make your own schedule, as you saw from my example of what my weeks look like. You design your schedule to be what you want it to be. You have a flexible location. You decide where you want to work. And that doesn't mean just I'm working at my desk at home or I'm working at a table at a coffee shop. It also means I'm working in my home city or I'm working remotely on a project halfway around the world. Consultants have a lot of flexibility in terms of where they're working. You get to choose your projects. So you work on what you want to work on and you don't have to work on what you don't want to work on, which when you're employed with an employer isn't always the case. Sometimes a project gets put on your plate that you are not feeling. And that does not happen in the world of consulting where you choose your own projects. Similarly, you choose your colleagues. You don't have to work with folks that you don't want to work with, and you work with those who you do want to work with. It's a beautiful thing. And finally, you kind of chart your own earning potential. And I guess I hadn't really realized that until I started consulting, but it is in your hands, kind of how much you make. And you can financial forecast what it would take to make what you want to make and then try to achieve it. So that's all kind of in the pro sector, I think really strong pros. But with that autonomy that I've highlighted in all these various pros comes a lot of responsibility, which I think is conveyed by some of these cons. So obviously the salary is completely dependent on you. You only make money based on the work you find. So you have to find your own work. And if you find no work, you don't get paid. And related to that, there's potentially a fluctuating workload throughout your year. So income is not necessarily stable. And that's one of the things you're trying to achieve as a consultant, how to maintain ongoing income to support yourself. But that fluctuating workload can certainly be a con when you can't depend on regular income looking the same every month. You're completely responsible for all work-related expenses, and you have this kind of increased administrative responsibility. Things that are done by someone else when you're employed in a large institution are on your plate for you to do as an independent consultant. And then there's certainly the lack of colleagues, the lack of camaraderie, or not feeling like you have a team to work with. But that I think I'm going to talk about on the next slide can be addressed. But hopefully what you see here is there are wonderful pros and there are certainly cons, and it's a matter of thinking through what works and what doesn't work for you about this path in terms of some of these. So as I said, consulting can certainly be lonely, but I'm here to say it doesn't have to be. And I don't mean just this like really sad looking, I don't know, what is that, a teddy bear who's looking for a friend. Yes, it's nice to have colleagues and a sense of a team and the office camaraderie that you get when you're working with peers. That's awesome and great. But it's also, I mean, lonely in the sense of you're charting uncharted territory. This is a path that you're paving for yourself. And it can feel lonely if you don't feel like you have someone holding your hand through it. Like the questions you might ask someone in HR if you're an institution, like there's no HR to ask, you're just by yourself. But my whole point in showing you this sad little guy who's looking for a friend is that you actually don't have to feel alone. There's this like amazing world of public health consulting resources. And I'm just going to highlight a few here. There are a tremendous amount of podcasts out there and blogs and discussion boards. And I mean, both for consulting at large and for public health consulting specifically. There are mastermind groups and master classes. There are consulting networks you can join. You can pay for coaching and online courses. These other things I'm talking about are completely free, by the way. You can just join communities online. There's a whole world of resources that can help support you and give you a sense of camaraderie because you're working with folks around the country or around the world in collaborations. You can tap into these networks so you have folks who you can ask questions to who've gone that, down that same path before and probably had the same question before you. And so down here, I've pasted just a few screenshots of some wonderful resources. You see Dr. Huntley there with her awesome podcasts about public health consulting. The next image is The Craft of Consulting, a wonderful resource led by Deb Zahn, who is a mentor to me beyond belief. I didn't know someone could be so incredibly helpful in my life as I charted my path in consulting. She's fantastic, and those are some of her podcasts shown there. Roman Public Health Consulting has a great blog there. I posted the one on Ultimate Guide to Starting a Public Health Podcast, but she has a world of resources there. This is an ad for the free webinar that the Australian Public Health Consultant Network was giving. Awesome. And this Facebook group, Public Health Consultants and Entrepreneur Professional Networking Group, is one of my favorite resources of all time. I've also put the U.S. Small Business Administration there because that's a really helpful resource when you're trying to figure out like finances and legal stuff. And you can tap into your local chapter of that and get some amazing support. So all of this to say, there is a lot out there, and you can feel like you have someone holding your hand and a network of people supporting you as you charter your path in public health consulting. So I think it's important to, start thinking about this now. If you want to become a public health consultant, what can you do at this very moment to start charting that path? So I'll just highlight a couple things I think you can do now. I think you should definitely be taking all relevant coursework you can get your hands on. So obviously you should be taking courses that are specific to your area of interest and expertise and really broadening your knowledge base. But I think it's also really important to take any courses you can get your hands on and really related to like leadership, management, and budgeting. Super, super important and super helpful for public health consulting. Social media and public health coursework would be awesome for this. Communication, data visualization, grant writing coursework, any of these areas would really well prepare you for some of the tasks on hand as a public health consultant. You should also start thinking about your niche and carving it out any chance you get. So as I talked you through the funnel of like big picture, what area do you fit into, and then establishing a niche within that, that's an important thing to think of now, because you could start attending any lectures or webinars or courses that you see that are related to your specific niche that you want to pursue. Any opportunity to learn more about that area and make it your specialization, you should jump on. It's worth joining groups on Facebook and on LinkedIn, the ones I was mentioning just now about public health consulting or related to your topical area. Just get into groups and to be part of dialogues that will be helpful as you chart this path. There's also, I'm sure, groups within your department or at the School of Public Health or Medicine or Business that would be super helpful. Joining groups is a great way to network and get access to information and course offerings that are out there that you may not know about. I think you also should be putting a lot of thought and effort into building your network. This is like in general a great thing to do, but for public health consulting, it's fantastic to have as broad a network as possible. So you should be thinking about opportunities to teach and mentor others, and you should certainly have your own mentor or mentors that can be holding your hand along the way through this. It's also important to foster relationships now that can turn into future collaborations. I'll just give you an example. When I was doing my Ph.D. at Hopkins, I was in an NIH training grant with 3 other individuals, and one of them and I were finishing the program together, writing our dissertation together through all those last months. And now today she is a research faculty member at NYU and has brought me on as a public health consultant to help with that research. And I just think of how far we've come from our days of being on the NIH training grant together at Hopkins, and now I work with her. It's really wonderful to foster relationships that could lead to future collaborations every chance you get. I would definitely sign up for any career development courses or webinars that you can. Any career prep that would be helping you learn how to effectively market yourself would be super helpful. And any programming that's offered around interview skills and how to interview effectively, this would all be really helpful. And then just generally keeping your finger on the pulse of public health. So I think it's important to follow the trends. You should be following on Twitter or signing up for newsletters with folks that you think highly of in the field, so that you can really kind of keep your pulse on what's going on. So that's the basic overview of public health consulting that I wanted to provide an overview with, so that hopefully you feel oriented to what this looks like as a career path. And if you like what you saw and want to do a deeper dive, part 2 is the ins and outs of public health consulting, where I'll be going into that kind of nitty-gritty level of what it looks like to be a public health consultant. And my email is at the bottom of the slide if you have any questions. Thanks.